So namaste, welcome to Satsang this evening. So Satsang has been going on for thousands and thousands of years, and it really is aimed at the direct experience of what we really are, to come to the fastest experiential seeing, not just a thinking or knowing about what we really are. And why do we want to do that? Why do we gather together in a group such as this? It's really because there is, in our everyday life, in our everyday state of consciousness, we are plagued by losses and unfulfilled desires and suffering of all types. And in that everyday level of consciousness, there is no permanent thing that we can rely upon. And if you find yourself in a satsang such as this, it's probably because you feel that somewhere inside there must be something deeper to access about yourself, something much more reliable and permanent, something that isn't going to come to an end. And so satsang is really absolutely for that. It's for the experiential seeing. And that's what I'd like to go into tonight. And to do that, I just want to take a look at something first, just to talk about something very briefly. And that is to look at why human beings have come to consider that awakening is a difficult process and takes, in my own experience, it seemed to take a long time and be unnecessarily drawn out and complicated. And the more conscious of my real nature I became, the simpler that process had become, and the simpler I had become. And really, as human beings, we are taught to value that which is changing, to value that which is coming and going. So obviously referencing our thoughts here, our ideas, our beliefs about ourselves, but also everything else in our everyday world. Even, of course, our body is going to come and go. It's already arrived. At some point, it's going to leave. There's going to be something impermanent about anything that we can experience that comes and goes. And there is nothing wrong with this world full of other beings and all the phenomenal experiences we can have as a human being, from the highest to the lowest. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it is not going to be that I that we use to experience those things, that sense of myself, is not going to be here once the body is gone. It's not permanent, it's not reliable. So it really serves us together in such a meeting like this to come to see, to realize that it is something permanent and stable and reliable. And for many years, it's had this myth associated with it that to recognize what we really are is very, very difficult. But really, what actually was difficult for myself along the pathway, and for many beings I encounter, is the fact that we're trying to recognize what is real about us with a mechanism for recognizing, so our senses and our mind, with that mechanism that we use to recognize the phenomenal world. And even if we recognize that we can't see what is real with our eyes and it doesn't have any shape or tangibility, we can still be somewhere inside ourselves berating ourselves because we don't know how to find what is real. Somehow, some feeling inside that I come across in lots of beings, and it was in myself as well, that this totally different way of perceiving myself, that I should somehow know how to do it already. And it's just not so. because if all we've ever been taught is to perceive ourselves using our mind, using our senses to perceive our world, using those to perceive in that way, then none of us can be expected to be able to perceive what is real and permanent without a little guidance, without a little nudge in how to look for that. So that's what satsang is for. It's really a place where we come to fall in love with that which is constant in our experience, that which is always at first in the background of our experience, that which is not coming and going, that which has been here before even our body arrived. And because of that, we don't pay any attention in particular, because there is this fascination in human beings with what is moving, what is changing, what is becoming, and the phenomena of thought and experience and emotions, and the infinite number of experiences we can have as a separate being keeps us almost hypnotized for a while. It's fascinating. We're drawn to that. So a very extraordinary thing has happened if you find yourself in satsang, that is no longer enough for you, that there is something else that you're seeking and finding even more clearer. So how do we notice that which is constant? How do we notice that which is here all the time? Or perhaps even more intelligently, how do we miss it if it's here all the time? And it's really just one simple thing, that if you change one very simple habit, and we can either do this through self-inquiry, through meditation, or as we're doing tonight, just by some direct seeing. And that is the habit to look at phenomena first, to notice, to put more attention on anything that's moving and changing. Wherever any phenomena arises, so some feeling of in the body, some sensation coming up, some emotion, some thoughts passing, coming and going, there is always going to be attention drawn to that first and foremost. And to do that, we have to come to completely ignore the background space in which all of this is arising. So a thought appears because there is some space for it to arise in, some background, open emptiness in which that thought arises. And we can see this also with our body and everything, in whatever room that you're sitting in to watch this. There is all the objects in that room, including your body and whatever you're seated on. And we tend to notice those first and foremost. As soon as we walk into a room, our attention goes immediately to the things in that room. And it hardly ever goes to the space, the empty space, the spaciousness that's present. That has to be here first before any of these objects can arise. And maybe the simple shift that we're looking for in satsang is to come to recognize that perhaps the thing that we may have labeled with our mind as not important, as not relevant even, not intelligent, not me, first and foremost, this empty space in which the room that you're sitting in is appearing. If you look inside yourself, you'll find some kind of label in there that empty space is unimportant and it's inert, it's kind of flat or dead, or it certainly can't be the thing that I need to investigate most clearly. There'll be some feeling in there that the objects in the room, including your body, your thoughts, your emotions, are much more important than the background construct in which they're arising. So satsang is really where we come to kind of turn that around, when we can actually begin to see the space may be different, the formless space in which all this is arising may be very, very different to the objects, in that it's not shouting for our attention, it's not changing, and it's not moving, and it's not becoming. And perhaps most importantly, for finally beginning to turn this around, it's not going to appear exciting at first. It may seem completely dull and obvious that it's here, and yet we overlook it every single second of our life. Have you ever actually stopped and noticed the space in which the room is appearing? And ask yourself which one was here first, the space or the house or whatever it is that you're sitting in. Can any of these objects be here first without this spaciousness for them to arise in? Can our thoughts appear and disappear without that spaciousness for them to arise in? Even the planet itself, the Earth, even the galaxy, the universe, there must be some formless nothingness, emptiness, whatever we want to call it, silence, stillness, in which there is no tangibility at all, and yet all of this can arise and appear in it. And just maybe there's going to be a huge shift for all of us when we begin to see that maybe this isn't actually just dead, inert space after all. Maybe it's the complete opposite of how we've labeled it. Maybe it is complete intelligence, pure sentience before any form, and that any form that arises, the intelligence that seems to come through the form, isn't really inherent in the form, the body, the human body. It is actually this inert spaciousness that is not so inert. It's actually the intelligence behind all of this. So looking at a few simple assumptions that we may have. Firstly, that the objects are much more important and need paying attention to. And secondly, that the space in which they're appearing is not important at all. Then we can begin to really turn those around, because if we're honest, the space in which all this is arising is the only thing that's going to last forever. It's the only thing that is not going to come to an end. Even if the whole planet was disappeared tomorrow and the whole manifestation disappeared tomorrow, there would still be this empty, conscious empty space in which all of this is here right now. So it really serves as just to kind of put attention on, in Satsang, we come to put attention on that which the rest of the world tends to overlook, that which is always present, and yet attention is hypnotically drawn back to what's moving. We can see this in our everyday, if you watch anything on the TV, the characters, the angles of the camera shots are constantly changing and moving to kind of keep fascinating our attention. If you go past an advertisement outside, it's full of bright colors and trying to get our attention. And this empty formlessness, this nothing in particularness, seems to be the complete opposite. It seems to be dull and unimportant. But it's here even before our body arises, before even the first thought arises. And it's here all the duration of the body. And then it will be here when the body disappears too. So it really serves us to get to know it. So it seems a little bit backwards at first to put attention on something that we've ignored, that's been here forever. But perhaps we haven't noticed or really grasped the significance of it. And whether we call it formlessness or silence or stillness, something wonderful begins to happen when we put attention upon that. It begins to reveal its secrets to us. It begins to show what it really is. And then we can come to a clearer and clearer seeing that that is what we actually are. that the same space that's permeating the room I'm sitting in is endless, and it's the same one being, intelligent, formless being that is permeating every room of every person that's watching this and will ever watch this. That it's something before even form, that it's the height and the origin of intelligence even. So our satsang really becomes a love affair with what the rest of the world will ignore as unimportant. And just to see that it's the only thing, it's not really a thing, but it's the only thing that is not going to disappear, should hopefully help us to see how important it is to begin to put a little bit of attention on it. And you can do that even right now, even when your eyes are looking at an object, a shape. So maybe right now they're looking at the shape that you're seeing on the screen. You can still, even with your eyes looking at a particular shape, you can still notice the empty space in the room that you're sitting in. Even the very presence of an object, such as your body, is only possible and we can notice in contrast with the objects, the empty spaciousness in which those are arising. And maybe you manifested this body and mind so that you can see the contrast. If you are, after all, the emptiness, how would you know that? How would you come to see that without the contrast of coming and goingness and changing and becoming and moving and evolving and all of that? How would you ever come to clearly recognize that which is before all of that without something to contrast it against? So as you move through our human existence, we begin to see that nothing that has arisen out of this emptiness is going to survive forever. It's just not possible. But we can begin to see the emptiness is here forever. What can cause the emptiness, the space that the room is sitting in, that your body is appearing in? What can cause that to come to an end? Is there anything at all you can do to that that's going to cause it to suffer or to be hurt or to come to an end? Is there anything at all that can damage that formlessness? So our satsang is first and foremost a process of recognizing, of seeing, of what's always here, that's for the most part overlooked by all of us, until it becomes really important to find it. And then we can begin to prove to ourselves through some deeper seeing that there isn't anything else other than this. If I ask what I am, if I look for what I am, if I ask the question, who am I or what am I, I'm going to get many answers to that question. I say, well, I am this body. I am some thoughts that are arising, some emotions, some experiences, some sensations. I'll get many, many different answers. All of those answers are talking about some aspect of myself that is impermanent and is going to disappear. There is only one answer to that question of who am I really, that was here before the question arose and will be here to perceive now and will be gone. It will be here when the body's gone. And that is the emptiness. So could the thing that seems to be the least important actually be the most? Could the thing that seems to be the least exciting actually turn out to be the most wonderful thing? Maybe we've been experiencing it as nothing relevant at all because that's how we've kind of labeled it. That's how we're programmed as human beings to pay attention to that which is trying to grab attention. What does it mean for you then if this is what you actually are? It means that you're using this body and mind to look through, to listen to these words right now. But it means nothing at all is going to be different for you when that body and mind have disappeared. So it's worthwhile in really investigating, coming to see. Asking this question again and again, what really am I actually? And noticing that all the answers that come are going to be phenomenal answers, meaning they're not wrong, but they are not going to give you permanent peace. Even when we ask this question, what really am I actually? This empty space is stunningly presenting itself, this emptiness, this not a thingness. It may be the thing that is the least tangible about us, the least visible, the least audible. Is perhaps our most fundamental nature of all, is perhaps the thing that we can come to experience as permanent and stable and unchanging. And you are this body and mind too. You are your experiences and you are your relationships, and all of that is fine. Your work, your family, all of that is just what we can enjoy while the body is here, and it's fine. As long as we don't rely on that for our sense of security, our sense of freedom, our sense of who we are in our fullest aspect. So can you shift your focus just for a few minutes a day? And this is what we call meditation, really, just to begin to become aware of that which is in the background of our experience. What is in the background, when it's noticed, will begin to move to the foreground. It'll become more and more obvious that there is always something here that isn't changing, that isn't moving, that isn't suffering, that doesn't actually even need the body. Doesn't mean you're going to drop the body when you find this. It just means you won't be scared anymore of the body leaving, ending. And there is some wonderful things that begin to happen when you begin to notice that which everyone else overlooks. And that is, you begin to experience as if you are already, which you are, that emptiness. You begin to experience not needing anything. You begin to experience not being able to come to an end. You begin to experience quietness and a deep silence inside. Really coming to this understanding, this seeing that what you are is before any of these forms. And that you've always been here quietly in the background, but maybe attention went to all the things that are moving and changing in your experience. So it kind of takes an extraordinary human being to end up even in satsang, to come to be interested in that which seems completely dull to the mind and unimportant. But I hope you're beginning to see that it's a lot easier than perhaps we might have imagined. That there is only the one, I'm using the word thing, but it isn't a thing, that is always present, always. And maybe it's not at all what we've thought it was. Maybe it's something so much different. Just to put attention on that, to know that it's here. You can't see it with your eyes and you can't grasp it with your hands, but it's very definitely present. You can notice it by contrast at first. All these objects are arising in it. Your thoughts are moving through it. Your house is built in it. The planet itself is sitting in it. And as you do that, then it begins to be experienced as more and more real. And all this coming and goingness becomes a little bit more unreal or dreamlike. And it's not necessary for you to have your attention on what's coming and going completely all the time for it to function. It will begin to actually function better. Your body and mind, your world, your relationships will play out spontaneously when you're resting attention on this formlessness. How do we do that? Just to know it's here, just to recognize there must be something intangible in which all this tangibility is visible by contrast. There must be something invisible so that I can see all these forms in contrast. There must be something that's not making any noise at all, so we can recognize the noise of the mind and the outer noises in our world, in our environment. And you just fall in love with that then. You just begin to fall in love with that. Maybe beginning to recognize that this may be the most important thing you'll ever discover, even though it doesn't seem like anything important at all. It doesn't feel like anything important either at first. Even when we discover it, our attention will still consistently want to go back for a while to the phenomena, to the thoughts. Still, there is this love affair going on with mind for a while. Every human being that's ever walked the path has gone through that struggle. Just a little bit of curiosity about what this really is will take you a very, very long way into discovery. And your life kind of ends up inside out, meaning backwards to what most people are looking for the best experience they can have to feel as good as they possibly can. And trying to get that from their phenomenal world, their relationships and everything. And in the end, we end up with that backwards, where all our attention rests on that which is not changing, which is not visible. And we end up having the best experience we can have as a human being also. And the best thing is you don't even need to know how to do any of this, just the intention, just the desire. What is it that's in the background of my experience? What is it that I overlook every single time? And it's gonna, just that openness, without even needing to find out how to do that, just that openness, something is going to start to become clearer for you. And whether you recognize it as a spaciousness that's ever present, or a silence that's underneath these words, that's in between these words, or a stillness that isn't moving, in which all of this is changing, moving, or an awareness that is just listening, watching, whatever we're calling it, it doesn't really matter, whatever we're calling it, but you begin to recognize just what it really is. And then you begin to recognize that it is actually what you are. That this body that you're using to perceive the world is secondary and an add-on, an optional extra, which you can enjoy then. So just to not overlook what is always here. Because it's always here, we don't pay any attention at all. Because it's everywhere all the time, we don't give it any attention at all usually. Only when our phenomenal experience, our someoneness, and our life as it's going becomes extraordinarily painful, it was for me at least, that's the only time I turned towards this in desperation, not even knowing there was something else, just desperately hoping there was some other way to experience myself. It doesn't have to be that long and drawn out if we can begin to realize that maybe the most important thing we can ever come to recognize is that one that's been under our noses the whole time, but maybe we haven't known how to see. We haven't valued what it could be. We've been labeling it as something completely unimportant, something that's not going to get us anywhere, something that's not, doesn't seem like it's going to bring us peace, love, and joy. It doesn't seem like it's going to bring us abundance to recognize this. In fact, if we leave it to our mind to describe it, mind will say that it's totally, totally boring. What's the point? What are you going to get out of just noticing empty space? But if you've had enough of that, then you'll spend some time noticing the empty space and see how that actually feels when you do that. What effect it has upon the body and mind when you do that. Okay. So I will I'll open it up for questions. I have a question that's been emailed in, so I'll read that and answer that first. If you would like to ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so. If you want to click on participants at the bottom of your screen and scroll down to the bottom of that, there's an option to raise your hand. If you'd like to ask a question or share something, you're more than welcome. So I'll start with this question first. It says, I am not getting the example provided. Awareness seems to infer oneness. I am aware of my thoughts and body, but awareness is not them. So I could be awareness. What the I is could be awareness. However, awareness still could be an emergent phenomenon from brain activity, materialism, meaning awareness could be just another non-physical brain phenomenon, similar to thought or emotion. After all, in deep sleep, all three disappear together, and none are ever present. All three seem to be similar and related to brain activity. All we can know in our unenlightened experience is objects seem to separately, persistently exist as we move in and out of conscious awareness. Anything else is beyond our experience. We can logically imagine objects being inside our awareness. When I do that, there is no experiential shift in perspective. It's just another thought experiment in my brain. So that's good that we're noticing that what we're doing, what we're trying to do isn't causing an experiential shift. That's really important. Kind of like me imagining jumping out of a plane, that experience would be totally different than all the thoughts I can speculate about it. The fact that awareness does not seem to have properties makes it different from objects. However, what it is not does not definitively conclude what you claim it is. The one space that contains all objects. That's a leap of faith, so I need a better approach. Okay. So awareness seems to infer oneness. I'm aware of my thoughts and my body, and my awareness is not them. Good. However, awareness could still be an emergent phenomenon. So that's good to check, isn't it? To make sure, is awareness something that's happening in the brain? Because if it is, then it is temporary also. It's not going to be reliable. And it's good to eliminate that, to really begin to check that out. But when we're doing this with the mind makes some certain assumptions, and there is one of these here. Awareness could be just another non-physical brain phenomenon, similar to thought or emotion. After all, in deep sleep, all three disappear together, and none are ever present. Well, that's how it appears from the mind. I'd ask you just to check that out, because emotions and thoughts disappear in deep sleep, but awareness is present still, even in deep sleep. Why? How can we prove that to be true? How can we come to understand that that is so? Well, even in deep sleep, if you went to sleep now and went into deep sleep, there would be no thoughts, no experiencing, no time, no sense of time, no space. But something is still watching, because you can tell me in the morning when you wake up, for that whole time I was asleep, there was no experience, there was no thought, activity, there was no sense of time passing, there was no this and that or high and low, no duality. So I'd really ask you to question that particular assumption. Thoughts and emotions and all of that disappear in deep sleep, but awareness is still present. Something knows, something is watching even during deep sleep. And it's the same thing that knows if you come out of deep sleep and start to have a dream at nighttime. That same knowingness, that same awareness knows, okay, now there's a dream, it's watching the dream. And it's the same awareness that's watching no experience at all in deep sleep. Kind of like sitting in front of the TV with it turned off. There's nothing to watch, but you're still watching. And it's quite peaceful. It's extraordinarily peaceful. So I'm not asking for a leap of faith here. That's it's not going to satisfy you anyway. That really just to question the assumption. The assumptions that we come into this with are correct from mind's perspective, but the assumption being here that awareness disappears in deep sleep. Something does. The ordinary, everyday I that I've been experiencing as a separate being disappears. But there is still something watching, something that says, you know, for that whole time, and it can only say it afterwards through the body when the waking state reappears, but it is there in deep sleep even to see there is absolutely no phenomena at all, no time passing, nothing to see, nothing to watch. And now the waking state's reappeared, and that same awareness is now watching the waking state happen. So I just, very good question. And it's really good not to settle for assuming and thinking about it, and to want to actually prove it. If this is real and true about you, it should be experienceable right now. It should be provable that there is something about you that's watching, and during the waking state, it's watching through the senses, it's hearing through the ears, it's listening to these words right now. And during deep sleep, it's watching no experience at all, nothing, no thing. And awareness can be present without anything to be aware of. And this is the deep sleep state. And this is the experience of an awakened being. It's not really an experience, it's constant, but there isn't a word to describe that. So awareness can be and always is present. But you must come to prove that inside yourself, to really begin to question this assumption that it's gone during deep sleep. Something is still there. Something's watching even then. Okay, so we have a question waiting from Scott. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So my first time on here, and I've before I went through, I think about the majority of your videos, pretty detailed. I have a lot of trouble trying to, everything pulls my attention. And when it pulls my attention, all these things that everybody's talking about are meaningless to me, because all of a sudden I find 5 minutes later, wow, I'm over there. And yeah, I can bring my attention back. It stays there for a millisecond. And yeah, I know you can keep doing it and it's supposed to get better, but it feels like I need to do something better, because I think my brain thinks everything's so much more interesting that's an object, whether it be a thought or emotion or something else. It pulls so strong that all of these processes and these meditations, I would consider them highly unproductive. I keep doing it forever, and I feel like I'll be doing this for 40 years, and I'll just be like bouncing around like a ping pong ball, monkey mind or whatever.
I'm not laughing at you. I just remember that exact same feeling inside. I remember it really vividly. Like I'm sitting here in meditation, and the only thing that's going on is my attention is just wandering around like a crazy monkey, you know. So yeah. So what are you trying to get to in your meditation, your practice? What is there anywhere that you're trying to get to? And it might sound like a strange question, but
I don't know about trying. Because everything that you could focus on is an object, and therefore when I try to focus on the focuser, that's an object too. The witness, that's an object, because that's, oh, look at me, I'm focusing on something. That's also a once removed object, like a relative, like once removed, but it's still an object. So everything you can do is to find an object. And then you could say, well, it's not doing, which is a little confusing. So what, you rest back into just watching, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're not there. I'm gone. I'm like, I must have a very active mind, you know, because obviously you see I'm like in computers and you know, do a lot simultaneously, and a lot of thoughts come to mind. My mind never is not on an object, whether it be a thought or whatever. And when I do this, it's like I relax back into it. And yeah, I do notice that there is something that is aware for, I don't know if it's a whole second or something, but I see it, but it's not persistent. It goes away quickly. I can't maintain it. And I feel like maybe it's because I feel like I have to maintain it to get anywhere with this, because to me, this is all very too ordinary. Oh yeah, I noticed. Okay, whatever, next. Okay, oh wow, that's more interesting.
yeah. And it's absolutely, what you're describing is very, very common. And it was exactly the same for me. Exactly.
How'd you break out of that?
It was really by, like you're kind of pointing out, that isn't working. Trying to keep attention on the awareness only for any length of time, it just doesn't work. It's just not a good long-term plan, and it just ends up with a whole lot of frustration. And it's enough even to those moments when you recognize, you can use the phenomena that are arising to recognize the awareness in which they're arising, to contrast. That very simple thing is enough when done consistently. Okay, there's a thought, oh, it must be arising inside that. So instead of, when you notice attention has wandered, if you can bring it back to awareness, great. If not, just recognize that the reason you can see that phenomena, that thought, that emotion, that experience, even a sense of restlessness when you're meditating, because there is awareness of it. It's enough to come to see that awareness is always present before the phenomena. That's not the same thing as having to keep your attention on the awareness 100% of the time. Absolutely nobody can manage that, nobody. And at first it will be, you know, you might sit for 20 minutes to meditate and attention just wanders around 150,000 times in that 20 minutes. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It actually means you're doing it right, because you're beginning to recognize what's always been happening with your attention. You're getting clearer and getting some clarity on that. We just kind of let go of this idea so much that at some point, and we all have it, at some point I'll be able to keep my attention 100% on the awareness only. That doesn't happen by effort. Yeah.
So the activity of bringing it back and back and back a million times is part of what makes you realize what you're bringing it back to.
Just to, if you can't bring it back to the awareness, even to notice the very fact I can see this thought, perceive this thought, shows me awareness must be present. What if that simple thing in itself is enough? So simple to keep doing that consistently.
Maybe that's a belief that I think it's not enough that's keeping me away from it.
Again, because it's very, very simple, and anything that's powerful in spirituality, it was the same for me, absolutely. It's like, in my mind would say, well, that can't possibly be enough right. to find everlasting peace. How can that? But how it starts is just to recognize, okay, there's crazy loads of thoughts in my brain right now, and I only can perceive them because there's awareness present. There's something that knows the presence of those thoughts. And the more you do that, you use the phenomena that arise, you use the distractions, the restlessness, the this isn't working feeling, use all of that. I can only notice that because there's something about me that's watching. Just to keep noticing that very, very simple thing. It's a different approach, isn't it? Where you're not fighting the attention. You're not fighting, like one of those wild horses, those bucking broncos. It's like that at first. You just keep getting thrown off. You're trying to hold on and you keep getting thrown off. But just to notice whatever is distracting my attention. So you sit to meditate and it's really quiet outside and all of a sudden there's a whole lot of noise outside. The moment you sit down, okay, but I can only hear that because awareness is listening.
So that millisecond or that minute or that moment where you recognize that something's happening is just repetition of that, and eventually over time something is more noticed?
Yeah, because it begins to become clearer that awareness is always present. Every time you perceive a phenomena, it proves to you awareness is watching. So it begins to become clearer and clearer, but awareness is always here. And it doesn't need phenomena, as we're just saying in deep sleep even, it doesn't need phenomena. All this will come from the inside as a knowingness. It's just this one idea that's been disturbing you, that somehow you have to kind of keep your attention in one place more and more often. That's what meditation is. What if it's even simpler than that? What if you can just go, okay, my attention wandered 57 times in 20 minutes when I was meditating, but I noticed every single time it wandered, even if afterwards I noticed.
So when I close my eyes, like I sometimes do this and I think, okay, noise over there, thought popped into my head, my leg itches. I mean, it's just like, it's like, and then I somehow picture like there's a focus, like a spotlight, like turning and looking at each of those things, like some type of thing. And that's sort of what happens when I do it. It's a lot of activity. It's not a passive thing at all for me.
So just to notice then that spotlight, there's something always watching, wherever it turns to look at. It's got to be there to look first, hasn't it? Just that simple thing is going to begin to change everything, because first it becomes clear that it's always there looking. And you can even see right now that I can't see anything. And if I put my fingers in my ears, it can hear that I can't hear anything through my ears. It just becomes clearer and clearer. Yeah.
The thought of being a spotlight is a millisecond, but immediately it's whatever it's focused on. Oh, that's a loud noise. That's a deep noise. That's an itchy feel. Like all of that is consuming the focus.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That doesn't mean that your meditation is going wrong.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
What happens is the most effective meditation is so much simpler than we than we can actually grasp at first. If I looking at any phenomena, I can use it to show me that awareness must be watching.
Okay.
Yeah. Even to see thoughts, the presence or absence of thoughts, there's something seeing, isn't there? That very, very simple thing. The more you notice, it's always there. It's not your job to keep your attention on it 100% of the time. That's just impossible and very, very frustrating to try, as I'm sure you've experienced, as I did. As you start to see, but it's always there. It's watching. My closed eyes in the morning, and then I wake up and I look, and now it's looking through the senses, and it wasn't before. It gets clearer and clearer as you do that. And you can absolutely wake up without ever being able to get your attention to stay in one place. That's not the goal. And then it becomes clear after that I am that awareness, because I'm here first before any of these phenomena. All that's going to come as a knowingness from inside.
So what is that shift? I mean, from what I would consider what you always say is just so ordinary, to me, I notice nothing. It feels like, okay, I'm aware. Sure, I'm aware of being aware. That's nice, wonderful, move on. But I really don't, and I hear what everybody else is on in this group and these satsangs and whatever is saying, that there is definitely something that is perceived to be from a different perspective, even if you're perceiving the same thing.
Yeah.
It just seems like, how the heck did that happen? It's almost like a dissociative disorder. I think it's crazy.
It's just what happens is just little by little, these milliseconds that you're talking about of noticing it, like we were just saying,
Yeah.
they accumulate in their power and their clarity. You begin to have this seeing that becomes a knowing inside of what all the sages have said, but you begin to kind of know it yourself rather than just be something you're reading about. Because the awareness isn't just another phenomena, it is extraordinarily powerful. Even to notice it for like 10 milliseconds at separate points during your meditation is enough to begin to break through the illusion and the fog and this, our attention is running around all over the place. Eventually it goes, you know what, it actually starts to feel quite nice to just, even just to stop trying to police your attention, you'll start to feel different. Right? Maybe actually my greatest assumption isn't true. My greatest assumption is that I'm doing this wrong somehow. I'm not doing this meditation thing right. Maybe you're doing it right already, but it's
If
just
I've
so
been doing it right
extraordinary.
already, I've been doing it for very long and nothing, no shift,
Yeah, because you're trying to get the attention to stay in one place, perhaps.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay.
It's enough to just recognize, and at random moments during the day as well, when you're out in the store and you pick up some milk and you're going to go buy this milk, I can only perceive this because awareness is present. It's random moments like that. It's enough to break through. It's much more valuable to have 100 moments like that in a day than to try to sit for 2 hours and keep your attention on something when it's going to move around. Much, much easier. And it's
I'll
not
try
as
doing
hard as
that.
you think. You're
I'll try
already
doing
getting,
that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Very good question. Thanks. Okay, we have someone called iPad. I'm assuming that's not your name, but I'm not sure what your name is. Sorry.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, yeah, it's Rowena. Sorry, I don't know why it says iPad.
It's fine. It's fine. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks, Helen, and thanks for doing these Satsangs. This is my first time.
Oh, well, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. And what you just said as well, the points that you were just making were so helpful, because I think I've also been having similar thoughts in trying to keep awareness on awareness, so to speak. What I wanted to ask you about, I came across your interview with Buddha at the gas pump, and you mentioned something which really resonated with something I'm going through at the moment, which is to do with experiencing lots of kind of bliss and peace during meditations, and then kind of avoiding life. And I'm at the point where I've had a year off work, and I definitely needed some time off, because I had a kind of awakening of sorts about 4 years ago, and then I had 3 years of very intense work situation where I was gaining a qualification, so I didn't want to kind of stop, but I found it very intense and difficult, and kind of had lost a lot of motivation for what I was doing. Because of some of the stuff that was falling away during awakening, but also there was a lot of trauma that was coming up, so there was a lot of difficult stuff that I was experiencing, and it was all very intense. So I've had a year off, and also during those last few years I started meditating a lot more, and was for the first time in my life able to experience these states of bliss and peace, which I'd never really come across in that way before. And now I've been having this worry about going back to work, and I've had some kind of advice from another teacher actually, and saying kind of to follow my heart, and this, which I think is really like valuable advice, but I think that something is difficult for me, because I'm kind of thinking, I think that the question is, it's something around, I'm worried about getting very drawn into the intensities at work again, and kind of losing what I've gained, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I don't know if that's clear what I'm saying, because I know that I haven't necessarily given you a really
sort of sense that by going back to work, you're going to somehow undo the progress that you've made in the work that you've done on yourself. And it's probably, you'll find the opposite is true, that if life is now presenting you with something where you feel you have to go back to work for whatever reason, it's probably because it's the only way now for your awakening to deepen, or perhaps it's a major way for your awakening to deepen. Pretty much whatever we're worried about, it's actually the total 180 from what actually happens, you know, as you've probably noticed in your own experience. And it's natural that you would want some time to just sit with what you've seen and work through that. But what happens in my own path, there was these beautiful states, as you were saying, you know, in meditation, but then I got very my life got very segmented, and there was the rest of my life, and then there was when I was sitting in meditation. So this drive arose within me, this desire to experience that all the time. The only way that I could achieve that, as much as I didn't want to, was to really go back and engage in the world, in the life, and, you know, work and things like that. I was cleaning houses for a living at the time, and that was pretty much the last thing I wanted to do, because you just want to sit and feel it. So I kind of set about, okay, well, I must be able to, if awareness, or if the real self is here all the time, I must be able to experience it even while I'm busy, while the body's really busy. And yes, it may not feel as intense or as strong at first. And perhaps that's a good thing. You know, you really don't want to be walking around the office sort of, oh man, everything's so beautiful. You know, they might look at you a little bit strange or something. So, but it might not feel as intense, but if you make that, it must be here, it must be available, because I'm here and I'm it, you know, or it's here all the time. You can just grab it. It's just the next way for your awakening to continue to deepen. And you might surprise yourself. Even when the mind and the body are very, very busy, there can still be some recognition underneath that I'm just watching all of this activity going on. And if you allow it to be enough, however you can notice it at work, the real self, even if that's just 10 minutes out of the whole day, that's enough, isn't it, to start off with? You know, random moments, like we were saying before. And then it's just enough to recognize I don't have to lose it because I'm going back out there, you know. And that's probably what the fear is, some sense of I'm gonna it's natural that we first experience the self when we're seated with our eyes closed and very still, and there's no other external things going on. But gradually the desire is going to arise to want to feel like that all the time, and that's what's happening. And this is how you're going to do it, isn't it, to notice, you know.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's really helpful. And I think my kind of like one thing that's coming up in response to that is, you know, when there is kind of trauma, embodied trauma that comes up, and I don't know what else to call it really, because it just feels very physical when it comes up, you know.
And it is very, isn't it?
Exactly, certain emotions. And when I'm on my own, and obviously I can start to really allow all of that in, be the space around it, and, you know, allow it to kind of run its course and go somewhere else, or whatever it does. I think that's the stuff that really, there's a fear of that coming up. And then, because it was coming up in the last few years, and there were some moments where I was able to let it go, but in some ways it just felt so kind of intense. But I don't know, I think I know I'm in a different place now, and I know that I have, because I've experienced that piece so much more. It does feel more constant. But
you get to a point where you can have some quite strong emotion coming up in the body, but because you're not trying to push it away or do anything with it, that you actually might not actually really even notice eventually. Especially if you can prove to yourself the piece is still available even when that is happening. And there's a couple of little tricks I learned as well. You know, if you've got to go into a meeting or something and you're just about to burst into tears because there's a lot of fear or something, it's okay to consciously suppress it, to consciously think about something else. That's not the same as the unconscious avoidance that we do, you know, before we kind of really embrace this stuff. That's kind of a loving thing. Okay, it's probably not the best thing to walk into this meeting just sobbing, you know, and
Right.
you know, sort of rolling around on the floor doing yogic postures and stuff. You know, so there's it's the difference between pushing it away unconscious. I don't want to look at this. Say, okay, maybe now's not the best time, and you can actually engage your mind and think about something else on purpose. And it won't feel, it's not going to set you backwards doing that. Sometimes it's necessary. And the opposite experience too, if there's just so much joy that you just want to hug everyone in the office, you know, maybe it's a good just a little bit to do the same thing.
Okay.
You'll find out if you trust it more and more, it just doesn't happen so much when it's not a good time. It'd be when you're kind of at home and sitting afterwards, you know, you kind of find your way, feel your way through it. And sometimes even the act of, you know, your mind being focused on work or some task is enough to kind of take the focus off of it anyway. You know?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay. No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Helen.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
We've got a Bo.
Namaste, Helen.
Namaste. Nice to meet you.
I'm so grateful and excited to be here. This is my first time.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you. I originally was just going to share and say that I'm new here, but as I was listening to other people, a question came up. I've been when trying to focus on the awareness in meditation and just in trying to exercise mindfulness around daily life, I've been getting this like tingling or buzzing that happens in my extremities, and the more I entertain it, sometimes it like spreads, other times it doesn't. Is this something that I should be focusing on in terms of this work, or is that like a phenomena, a distraction, a part of form that's taking place that I should not pay as much attention to? Like I'm trying to, I guess similarly to the first person that shared, I'm trying to have an anchor point with awareness, and I'm wondering if that could be used as one, I suppose.
It's a very common thing. It happens to a lot of people because normally when we're focusing on phenomena and thoughts, it costs us energy to do that. And can you hear me okay? Yeah, the connection was a bit wobbly this end. When we start to notice the awareness, it's quite powerful. It doesn't cost us any energy to notice that. So what happens is it begins to build up in the body, and the body is energy, really. You know, it's not actually really a physical thing. So you can feel that energy begin to flow. And I remember sometimes sometimes people describe it as this buzzing, or sometimes a high-pitched whine in the ears, but it's some energy sort of really starting to build up. And again, it can be a nice feeling or it can be unpleasant, but it's it is, as you said, another phenomena. It's not there all the time. So if you can use even that to say, well, there's awareness of even that subtle phenomena I'm able to perceive, and just to stay, just bring attention back to the awareness if you can, and then the energy will begin to be able to move through the body. So we've had all this energy tied up in the mind and all of our thought stream, and when we begin to sort of bring attention, even just for a brief moment, to what is stable and permanent and is not a phenomena, this energy begins to move through the body like it always wanted to. So you'll feel it kind of doing all kinds of funky things, you know, like for me, I could really get a sense that it never really flowed properly, you know, my entire life. It was kind of reasserting itself, finding its path again. When attention is on that which is real, it was able to kind of build up and move around. And you might just find if you do any stretching or any yoga or something like that, might help, just to help it flow better. But in meditation, if attention goes to it, it's fine. It's just when you notice, you can say, well, there's awareness even of that. And, you know, it's there's lots of really subtle, really nice phenomena like bliss and even peace and things like that attention wants to go to, and things like this that you're describing. But you said it yourself, you know, it's still another phenomena. It's nice, and the phenomena get nicer and nicer as you probably noticed, right? It's just you can enjoy it. The body can enjoy obviously if there's some peace and joy happening, it's great. You don't have to push it away, but just to bring attention back to that which isn't a phenomena when you can, just to notice that. Wonderful. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Good. Lovely to meet you.
Wonderful to meet you too.
We'll take David's question and then we'll leave it for, oh, we've got one more there as well. Okay, we'll take these two questions. I think David was first, and then we'll call it a halt for tonight. Whenever you're ready, David.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Helen. Nice to meet you too. It's my first time here.
So welcome.
I really appreciate your teaching and sharing with us.
Thank you.
The question I wanted to ask is something that's been, I guess, on my mind for a while now, and it's about effort. You know, effort on the path. This is something that's been with me since I was young, teenage years, and I've been with a teacher very seriously for a number of years. I tried to ignore everything I knew for a number of years, got married, have a couple of children, you know, and lots of things going on. And the past couple of years, the spiritual impulse has really demanded my attention again.
Yeah.
And I've been putting, you know, the meditation has become a huge part of my life again, and I've been putting a tremendous amount of effort forward. But I've been getting to that point where there's this question of, and I've been struggling with it for a while, of effort versus trust, or sort of like, what's my role in this process? And I guess what I mean by that is there have been points in the past couple of years, my path has always had a fair amount of darkness and struggle that's been there. And I've heard in an interview you share some of your own struggles with that. And so it's not always been this light kind of fluffy affair. More often than not,
no. 99% disaster was my awakening, 1% success, right? 99% darkness.
Yeah, I mean, it's really intense. And I remember I heard another teacher talk about, you know, when you come to an unconditional relationship, that, in other words, you're willing to go through whatever you need to go through. And for some people that might be almost nothing. For other people that might be horrendous, you know, probably further than I can imagine. But I've got to that point where I'm sort of struggling with, I feel like in some ways I'm doing everything that I can possibly do. And in that, sometimes there's a sense of almost madness, right? Where you're the focus gets so intense, you're kind of driving yourself crazy in a way.
Yeah. And you can't even stop. Even when you're driving yourself crazy, you can't stop.
Yeah,
that's it. I'm not going to watch another Satsang, and then you find yourself like flicking through your phone and you're watching something on YouTube, and then
yeah, absolutely. And it's interspersed with these periods of like insight, or where the, you know, that kind of falls into the background. It waxes and wanes, like these things tend to. But I also noticed that, I've heard someone else talk about it recently, that same person who's on the spiritual journey, who's trying to make something happen, is also the fiction, is also the story that we're over identified with. And I'm wondering, like, between that feeling of doing everything you can do, almost driving yourself mad, certainly probably driving the people around you a little mad.
I remember that one. I'm not laughing at you. I remember it very clearly myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and then versus also like letting go. Like, I understand there's a middle path. It's kind of like the razor's edge, but I'm sort of struggling with when you get to that point where it's like the edge of madness, but you're still here. You're probably not going to go crazy. Like, how did you sort of negotiate that balance point of like what's my role and where am I reinforcing falsehoods by over asserting myself, if that makes sense?
So it's a good question. They're all good questions tonight. For me, it's a fundamental shift when I realized it was always both. Right, there was something driving itself absolutely nuts, trying to make this happen. Like storming the gates of Nirvana and like, I'm going to absolutely make this happen. And that just wasn't really getting anywhere. It was kind of just burning itself out bit by bit. But then there was, for a long time, there was, which one is it? Because I can't stop this thing that's going. It's just doing its thing anyway, all this efforting and striving. And then I heard that it's supposed to be about letting go and relaxing, and it just wasn't like that at all. But then I really began to see that even in the midst of this edge of insanity, as you so well put it, there was something that was just accepting that more and more. There was something that was just letting it do its thing. Okay, if that's what's happening, if my mind and my seekingness is going full at it, 100%, 150%, there's also something that's just relaxing and saying, okay, that's fine. Less and less. The best place to sit with that is to sit in the middle and not pick either one, right? Because our ego works in opposites. It perceives opposites, judges by what things look like, and it looks like this effortless, relaxing openness and this absolute driven obsession are opposites, it seems. But if you're just kind of, okay, I don't have to pick either one of those, the self isn't really saying that one should stop and this one should continue. Our ego, our mind says that because it thinks they're different. So you can just kind of go, maybe there's both happening at the same time. There's a trust that and an openness that's developing and a curiosity. At the same time, there's this kind of intense efforting going on. And as you just kind of relax into that, I don't have to stop either, work on either one of these. I'm just going to watch them both. You feel there's a kind of nice place to sit there with that. You can just watch the body and mind do what they do. And as you just watch that efforting, it'll begin to just slow down on its own more and more. And you can also use certain contemplation questions. You probably noticed that I'm quite obsessive about contemplation because it really helped me put the brakes on the seeking. Like, do I really need to get somewhere? Is there anything for me to find? These kind of questions that mind hated, but there was a slowing down in the seeking and the intensity of it, in that openness. And that's, we could literally turn that energy, that full, there's like this freight train of activity going on that was unstoppable. You can kind of turn that into an openness to look deeper inside rather than trying to get somewhere. There's nothing wrong with that craziness in itself, just to redirect it from trying to get to something. Can you see?
Yeah.
You can actually turn it into, okay, let's turn that into looking inside and going deeper into this moment rather than naturally it's trying to get somewhere or trying to become something. You can, well, what is there really to become, or where do I really think I need to get to? And a kind of question like that, but it really breeds an openness. So start by not trying to pick one or the other. Okay. It's impossible.
It sounds like, and I sort of sense this in myself, but it's important, I think, to check these things. And it seems like that unconditionalness that I talked about a little bit in terms of what we're willing to tolerate or go through, and then the trust to kind of hold the present moment in that unconditional space. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wisdom, that, isn't it? That I don't know what I need to experience to wake up fully, and whatever it is, I'll kind of, whatever it takes, attitude kind of builds inside, doesn't it? Some sort of openness, and that's really, I guess, the reason for the suffering, is to drive us to that point. Okay, whatever it takes, I'll go through it. But naturally, there's also letting go into that place inside yourself where whatever you go through, you're not going to suffer. Whatever the body and mind have to experience, you don't need to be suffering through it. If you're recognizing that awareness, that silence more and more, there is some part of you that isn't suffering no matter what's going on. So it's kind of just, but by the time someone asks this kind of question, it's already a bit too late for them to kind of not wake up, you know. So it's just however long it takes for that seekingness to burn itself out. But even that doesn't signify awakening happening when that's burnt itself out. That might be going on for some time. But you can also just notice the space in which that seeking is going on, and that'll just be gently putting the brakes on it without trying to do something, you know.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Good, lovely. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Kyle.
Hi, it's Andrea.
Sorry. Hiya, sorry. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I had a Kundalini awakening a few years ago, and I think that happened because I had learned how to meditate by using my emotional pain as an anchor, kind of like Eckhart Tolle suggested. And I've had really aggressive symptoms ever since. And then I also had, like, I think maybe I've heard accelerated karma, like a lot of, like my external world, like, sorry, I didn't mean to cry.
Absolutely okay. This is the perfect place for it, isn't it? You're in a loving environment with all of us here, so.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess my question, and I feel really confident that that I'll resolve a lot of the dense energy that's still stuck in my body by doing what you've suggested, which is the awareness meditation and the self-inquiry and the contemplation. And I've already, like, that's amazing, and that's moved a ton of energy. So I'm gonna keep doing that, and that's fine. But I just wanted to ask, and I'm also not so desperate to escape the suffering, because through following your meditation, I've accessed the place where I can tell that you know, it really doesn't touch me, that I'm okay. But my question is just that the energy is really stuck in my throat, and for a long time it's felt like I have like a metal collar just sucking the life force out of me. I don't have any energy to do hardly anything. And that seems to be getting worse by the day. I'm like, man, I'm just gonna stay in bed all the time. So I just thought maybe I'd ask if there's anything specifically for that.
You're just gonna ask a couple of questions just to get clearer. The energy, does it manifest as mainly emotional pain, or is it sometimes physical pain, or is it stuff happening in your outside world, or is it kind of all of those sometimes? Or
my outside world is as mellow and awesome as it's ever been. So it's just in my throat, just a very contracted feeling, just really contracted.
okay, so if something is getting worse, the more your awakening is deepening. It's because, and you probably know this, but there's some belief in there that's no longer true for you, that's really no longer in harmony with what you've seen yourself to be. So usually around the throat area, it's some sense that I can't express myself. Being myself is not safe, you know, who I am. And of course, consciously, we don't feel that way. So it's some kind of ball of energy deep down inside, isn't it? That's just very, very scared. So I would suggest doing everything that you're doing, which is great, but also maybe asking, you know, is it really true, that it's not safe for me to express myself, or it's safe for me to be me, some kind of, and you'll get a sense of the question that kind of grabs you. But there's a kind of usually some fear of self-expression, some fear of being authentic, some fear of being who you are. And I'm not talking about the formlessness, I'm talking about how your mind and body is, what makes you individual and unique. Some message we've had earlier on in life that who we are is not adequate, or is not who you're supposed to be, or something like that. And it just needs to be brought. You can bring it into the light of awareness and begin to dissolve it with a gentle question, to really question, because the assumption is somewhere inside that I'm not good enough, and if I try to be who I am already, I won't be safe. And these are not sort of conscious things that we hold intellectually as a mature adult. They're kind of these fears that we've brought from childhood and maybe experienced at certain times, that inadvertently we've got this message, or from wherever it's come. You can just sit with this question: is it really true it's not safe to be me, or something like that? It's not safe to express myself, or whatever you can probably get a feeling of the idea that comes up with that. Does it come with an emotion? When you get that sense, does the emotion come with it too, do you find?
I've had all kinds of emotions: guilt, anger, shame, and I've done a lot of work on all of that. And I do process it as it comes up. And I have suspected it's something I do have a crippling fear of putting myself out there, and I can't even make eye contact with people. I try, and then it's very awkward. But yeah, it's something like that.
It's getting worse because it's less and less in alignment with what you're seeing yourself to be. So on my YouTube channel, there is a core teachings playlist, and on that is one video on contemplation. And it really goes through how to work with a question, to kind of, in the openness of the question, is it really true? It's not safe to put myself out there, or whatever way, you'll get a sense of the right question for you. But in that openness, you're just challenging the assumption, because the assumption's believed and it's been experienced over and over again for most of us. Something inside, some old fragment of ego really says, yeah, it's not a good idea to put yourself out there. So the cycle goes on because we keep experiencing it, because we're really agreeing with it. So to ask the question, you kind of break that loop. Well, is it really true, actually? Even though I've experienced it many times, let me just really look at this. And it's just a way to dissolve this energy. So suggest watching that video as well, and just finding the right question. You'll know the right question. Maybe it's one that we've already said, it's not safe to be authentically me. Or I really had this myself, and especially speaking in front of a group, it was terrifying, but who you are is exactly who you're supposed to be, no matter what your mind says. You'll just kind of come to a more gentler realization, experiential realization of that. Yeah. You probably just notice as the awakening deepens, it gets stuck in particular chakras, where there's some karma that's being carried, and it just comes up quite intensely because it's less and less agreeable with, what you're seeing yourself to be.
Okay, that's great.
You did very good sharing. Well done in front of all of us. You did great.
Thank you.
Lovely to meet you. Okay, so we'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.